Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to this month's Guardian HR webinar, where we'll be talking about payroll evaluation checklist, what to know before choosing your next HR technology. I am going to let our guest speaker introduce himself today. PJ, go right ahead.
Hello, everyone. I am PJ. I am the Vice President of Sales for Guardian HR. I cover our payroll and our HR division. Been in the payroll industry for almost about 10 years at some big names out there. Also was formerly in HR and operations using the technology that we'll discuss today. Excited to go through this with everyone.
Thanks, PJ. So as you know, for our clients, it's going to be a lot today, and this webinar will be archived. All you have to do is log into your Guardian HR dashboard where you can rewatch this. And of course, if you love Guardian HR and you want to share the word, please refer a friend. Share this with your friends and you'll receive a $250 Amazon gift card. Mention your Guardian HR team member's name. That's at guardianhr.com/refer-a-friend/. I am going to send this over to PJ and let him take it from here.
Thanks, Scott.
Of course.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm super excited for this topic. For those of you who know me, I'm very passionate on this project and on this topic alone. This will be the framework for the 5 stages of what I consider a better evaluation. And I'm going to break this into really 5 parts. First is just understanding the game that you're entering. Second is the internal work that you need to do way before you reach out to any vendors. Third is really figuring out who you should actually evaluate and why, and I'll go more in depth on that. Fourth is controlling the evaluation, making sure that you stick to what's critical for you in the organization. And then finally, understanding what happens after you select somebody, because let's be real here, implementation is where a great sales experience either becomes real or starts to fall apart. And you'll probably notice something as we go through this. A lot of the most important work happens long before the demos, long before the discoveries and the first meetings. So we'll go through that today. If you do have questions, you can follow up with us at the end and we'll try to address those. So the first part is just understanding the game you're entering. This is probably the most important context I can give you. When you're entering and evaluating HR, HCM technology, payroll, workforce management, whatever they want to call it, you're entering a highly curated sales process. These organizations that you're going to evaluate with invest an incredible amount of money into understanding how to sell their specific product. They know the competitive advantages. They know where the competitors are stronger. They know where they're weaker. They know what questions are likely to come up, and they know how to position themselves around to avoid their weakness. And good salespeople are trained extensively on how to do this. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's their job. I want to remind you that your sales rep, no matter what, they're trying to do the best they can in 90% of situations, but the company sells the sales rep before they sell you. So you need to understand the environment that you're walking into. One of the best thing a vendor can do is get you to change your evaluation criteria or change the conversation into the things that they're really good at instead of focusing on the things that are important to you in the organization on this project. If I'm vendor A and reporting is my greatest strength, I want you thinking reporting is the most important thing in this decision. Although vendor B might want you focused on the user experience or the culture dynamic. Vendor C might want you focusing on service and kind of the billing metrics. Suddenly, you're being influenced in your decision criteria. If you don't have a solid one before these conversations, it's being influenced in a direction that you're kind of losing control of. And it's something that it could be an exciting new feature or a perspective you haven't thought of before. But the biggest thing is to just start by building your criteria. And I'll go into that a little bit more here so that you're falling to what's mostly important for you. And you can start to see the differences because you're going to go through a lot of discoveries, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of information is going to start becoming flooded. So if you have a criteria and a checklist that you can continually refer back in these conversations, it really helps you. The other thing I want you to understand is that almost every company in this industry started with an ideal client profile. And, maybe they were phenomenal with companies that were under 50 employees. Maybe they were an enterprise organization coming down market. Maybe they were industry specific, whether they started with restaurants, construction, staffing, whatever it may be. But as these companies grow and as the investments grow, they build, they acquire technology, they add products, they move up market or they move down market, but all of it's following revenue targets. Eventually, the lines start to become blur on who's a great fit for them, and they just start focusing on the revenue and the metrics behind that. That's why, it's really not discovering if the vendor has a good product, because that is variable. That is a perspective. All of the products out there are really good at something. What you need to focus on is what that good matches your need. So your job's not really figuring out what's the best software, but more of what the best software is for you. The second thing here is just kind of building the business case. And this goes back to kind of the criteria. You should really ask yourself, why are you doing this? And the reason why I put this out is changing payroll or HR technology is one of the largest projects your organization is going to go through. And you're touching, everything: payroll, HR, benefits, finance, IT, recruiting, and every single employee. You might have employees that are not on your benefits or not in your CRM, but they're being paid through your system. So when you think about doing a project of this magnitude, you got to think about internally of what's broken badly enough to justify that disruption. Maybe you're spending 20 hours a week manually manipulating data. Maybe payroll doesn't integrate with financial systems and you guys are struggling to try to keep on top of all the data. Maybe you've outgrown the current technology and you're starting to really rely on, tribal knowledge or other aspects. Maybe compliance and the risk behind it is increasing. Maybe you've had a penalty. Maybe employees and managers aren't just using the system, so you're not getting that automation that you need. Whatever it is, document it very early on. Understand what you're trying to do, and then also understand what you're currently spending today. Not just kind of the invoice, right? There are monthly invoices. There's quarterly costs with vendors. There's annual costs with vendors. But what are you paying for additional systems? Maybe your HR technology doesn't do recruiting. Maybe you can consolidate that or look to integrate with that. So what are you paying for additional systems, any integrations? What's it costing you from a labor standpoint on manual processes? How long is it taking you to hire people through the system? Is there an internal administration arm? Are you paying consultants to kind of help you navigate things? Take all of that information and really take that to a budget standpoint. So when you're looking at building a budget for this project, I personally always am under the mindset that you should have a budget kind of aligned to play with before you start meeting with vendors, so you can kind of be transparent with the vendor in that aspect. It also helps you get ahead of, the conversations of budget and approvals for budget, because if you don't establish a reasonable range beforehand, it's very easy to fall in love with something during the evaluation and then try to reverse engineer it behind. If you really just say, hey, this is what we have to play with, and here's the why behind that, it'll allow that sales rep, especially a good sales rep, to get ahead of those conversations internally and really start to help you prioritize what do you need versus what's a nice to have, because you can probably get both. It just depends on what you look at. And I'll talk about negotiation later on and just what you need to know as you're negotiating price. But another area that I love to talk about is the buying group. Get the right people involved early on. And I don't mean everyone that has an opinion about payroll HR. Me personally, I'm particularly interested in the people who actually are administrator of something in the software. Who runs payroll? Who handles benefits? I want to add an asterisk there. I'll talk about benefits in a second. Who builds reports for finance? Who manages recruiting? Who handles the integrations? Who deals with managers when something doesn't work? Who's doing approvals on things like time cards, accruals, expenses? I want each one of those people, first off, to build a selfish list, a needs and a wish list. And then internally, you should build with that whole buying group a decision criteria together and understand what everyone's items are from a selfish standpoint of what's going to help them in their day-to-day and why, what's a need and what's a nice to have, and then really going from there. I did say I want to talk about benefits a little bit there. I highly encourage you to always talk to your benefits broker or your account manager whenever you're meeting with a payroll company, because there's a lot of options in today's space. There's integrations with open enrollment tools like Employee Navigator. A lot of payroll systems white label software like bSwift or have their own that they've built. And there's pros and cons to each. But at the end of the day, your benefits insurance company is the one that's really helping you through open enrollment the most. And you want to make sure that they either have a knowledge or an opinion on the benefit side of it. Is it better to integrate with something, or do they prefer this specific company's open enrollment tool, and just know the pros and cons? Because you don't want to surprise your account manager on the insurance side, like, hey, by the way, we moved to this company. This is the new open enrollment. Give them time to learn a new system too, because it might be it's best for you both, but they may not know it. Get them involved early in those conversations. And you should also ask them for recommendations, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So the next thing is just the context. One of the biggest mistakes I see in your decision criteria or your requirements, or just kind of supplementing items, and really just taking a step back of, we need good reporting. Every vendor on this world is going to tell you how good their reporting is, or how good their payroll process, or their onboarding system, or their service, but you need to see something. So instead, going on the reporting item, tell them the story and the context behind it. Every money finance needs a labor cost broken down by location of department. Today, right now, HR exports 3 different reports, combines them in Excel, manipulates the data, and sends it to finance. You want to see how the system can change that, if they can, or if it's going to be the same process or a better process or a worse process, because now we've got something. Who's doing it? How often are they doing it? Why? What's the desired outcome? That's an incredibly important start, because now the vendor can't just tell you a story and click once or twice throughout that. They need to show you on all of your specific items. This is something I'll continue to come back to, because again, I talked about in the beginning, these organizations are investing a ton of money into this process, into these demos, these talk tracks behind it, these case studies, these references. Even some of the references are ones that are being used by multiple people at the organization. And stories are fine, but for things that matter, me personally, especially when I was in HR and operations, I want to see the clicks, because they might not be lying to you when they say they can do it, but what they're avoiding is the context of how that looks. And that might be a deal breaker for you, but you might not find out until you get to the testing phase of implementation. So context on your decision criteria and all of your requirements is super huge to play with all the vendors, but also internally. And this is the scorecard I've talked about, many times. Once everyone has their needs, you've added the context, you get the buying group together. Now you build your decision criteria, right? What actually matters? Payroll, reporting, HR workflows, integrations, the employee experience, service, implementation, and then weigh it out and prioritize it. The percentages on the slide are not examples, are just examples. Yours might look completely different. You might have one huge critical need that's broken. If payroll's not right, obviously we know that's a huge thing. That could be 80% of the weight. But that's the point. This needs to be something that you and your company create together internally before any salesperson has a conversation with you. And print this out. I would use this on your discovery. I would use this on your demo. Check it off when you feel they showed you specifically that scenario and how they solved it. Check it off, right? Score against it. Score that same scorecard against vendor A, vendor B, vendor C, vendor D, because this is what really protects you from the nice shiny objects, the stories without clicks, the awards that they win. Because the question is not whether it's cool, whether it's easy user face. The question becomes, does it solve one of the reasons on why you've decided to start this project? And use this as you go into the testing phase and implementation as well. Because sometimes there's a bait and switch, and they show you something, but then you get to the team that doesn't know how to configure it. Use that in that same testing. Hold everything accountable so that you have the success of this project. Now, how to choose the vendors. As you're starting to look for the vendors, now that you've built your criteria, your scorecard, my first stop personally wouldn't be Google. I'd start with the people you already trust, your benefits broker, your financial advisor, your CPA, your employment attorney, some of your friends and other HR leaders or other CFOs, friends running companies or similar companies or friendly companies that are yours. Don't just ask what payroll company you like, give them the context, especially if you're talking to your insurance brokers or your financial advisor, your CPA. They most likely have more than one vendor that they have a relationship with. Going back to kind of the original point of every vendor has a really strong part. And these benefit brokers talk to them constantly. They have clients on almost all of the different platforms out there. So give them the context as well. 250 employees, we're in 5 states, we're a heavy hourly workforce. We have complicated overtime rules, and these are our 3 biggest problems and what we're trying to solve. Who have you seen do this well? Or do you have any other customers that fit this same demographic? Because that's a completely different referral. A warm referral can give you leverage. A broker or advisor who sends significant business to a vendor also allows you to get in front of a more tenured rep where they've had a ton of implementations. They're starting to know where they need to set proper expectations, or they need to know, hey, this is not kind of how we do it. It works like this. So if something starts going wrong, you potentially got another person who can pick up the phone and help you on that end, rather than just going to payrollcompany.com and requesting a demo and getting to a inside sales rep that's usually pretty new at the company. So use your network to find out who's the best, not only vendors for you, but also the best reps. If they've been at the company for 10 years, odds are they're a high performer. And that doesn't necessarily just mean from a revenue standpoint, because you might have 1 or 2 good years, but if all of your clients don't like you, it's going to start to spread out there. So if you have someone that's been at the company for 10 years, they know the product really well, they can understand what you're trying to solve, and they can tell you directly, like, hey, this is how we solve it, and you can determine if that works for you. The people over the logo. This one, I think, gets looked kind of all the time. You're not just buying a logo. Look at the people that you're working with. I already said this just on the last slide. How long have they worked there? How well do they understand the product? Have they worked with organizations like yours? Can they provide references from customers who actually work with them? It's not just, can the company solve this? Well, that rep, do they understand what you're trying to solve truly? Or are they showing you directly how they solve that? Are they going to be around when there's tough conversations? Because again, this is a big project. There's going to be a day or two where this testing is not what you thought, or hey, this is more bandwidth. So if someone's been with the company for 5 years or more and can immediately give me 3 client references who are similar and willing to talk about their experience, or even just about that individual, for me, that's a really good signal. I'm also asking, who owns me after I sign? Who owns the implementation? What's the scope of work? Who owns the relationship 6 months from now? If something goes sideways, who can I call? Or can I call? Am I going to be put to an AI routing tool? Am I going to be put to a 1-800 call center? Am I going to have self-help guides? Or am I going to have all of the above and have options? And just truly know what you're getting into, especially in the implementation. Understand the scope of work. Will you have a project manager? Will you have a responsibility of your half versus their half? Do they give you a bandwidth of expectation per week over the X amount of weeks that you're going to be implementing? And just if things start to go sideways, who can you call and rely on to get it back on track? Right. So going to kind of the evaluation and who you need to evaluate. Personally, I wouldn't go through a full process with 7 or 8 vendors. I might talk to 7 or 8 vendors just to kind of get a feel. But if you start to do 7 or 8 discoveries, 7 or 8 demos, 7 or 8 follow-up demos, 7 or 8 pricing meetings, you're going to lose your mind. At some point, everything starts to blend together, even with the scorecard. Some of the scorecards start to look familiar. You're trying to do work while you're also paying attention to the demo. So every platform starts to look similar. You can't remember who showed what, and everyone on the buying committee starts to get fatigue in the demos. So do your research, do your screening first, to get down to 3 or 4 vendors that legitimately have a chance of winning and showing you how they can solve the problem, and spend your time going real deep with those organizations instead of going shallow with a wide few. The demo, this is another area. Control it. This is where your preparation of the criteria, the scorecard, the internal conversations, the buying group starts to pay off. Don't let every vendor give you their standard demo and standard talk tracks. Again, they've curated this process to highlight the awards they're strong at, their go-to-market approach, and why it's different from the industry. They start to tell stories. What you'll see is they tell stories and they click less. They click through different parts of the platform instead of following a certain track. And they can certainly show you the platform, but eventually in my mind, I want to go back and see my scenarios. Going to that reporting that I talked about, like see that from start to finish. All right. Don't remember our reporting, right? Show me. Don't tell me. They tell you absolutely our system can handle that, great. Can you show me? And just to be clear, they might not be able to show you on that demo, but if they can't show you a follow-up video of it or a follow-up screenshot of an actual report configured a certain way, that's a red flag in my opinion, right? And another thing is ask where the limitations are constantly. What can't I configure? What do I need to have you do versus what I can control? Where do clients typically need workarounds on this scenario? Does this require an integration to another product, or does this require an upgraded tier to this product? Is there additional fee around any customizations? Does this require an external integration or a consultant? Does somebody on your service team have to do it, or can we do it, or is a combination of both? Another important one is, does this exist today? A lot of times the demos have roadmaps. They'll show you something. Oh, this is supposed to go live by January 1. That almost always gets kicked down a couple months. So if I'm buying technology today, I'm scoring that functionality of what exists right now today versus the roadmap. Although a roadmap is also important. You want to make sure that company's innovating and constantly staying ahead of the changes in our industry. But I wouldn't just buy something that's supposed to come off of next quarter. This is where you start to separate, a presentation from a fit for your organization. And as you're kind of going through, I talked about the scorecards. Don't wait till the end of the week. Take 5 minutes, or take as you're going through on each one of those items on your scorecard to score it immediately. Have everyone score independently while it's fresh. At the end of the week, I would do a get together. Where did we agree? Where did we score them differently? Why did HR love this vendor while finance hated them? It's a very useful conversation. I do believe gut feelings matter. If 3 people leave a meeting feeling uncomfortable about something, and it might be the individual, it might be the demo, it might be the product, don't just ignore it, because it isn't a line on your spreadsheet. Figure out why. Was it evasiveness? Did they avoid questions? Did something feel overly scripted? Did they understand your business or give you theory answers? Did you trust them? It shouldn't replace the scorecard, but it can tell you that you probably need to go a little further with that vendor. Maybe a second demo, maybe a second conversation to that scenario, and just keep continuously challenging them to go through it. Negotiation. So this is, we're getting towards a decision here. This is where I think everyone really gets excited about negotiating the subscription price. But I want you to pay attention just as much attention to implementation and what you lose for discounts, right? So a couple things, some of the companies I've worked at previously, if you discounted the setup fee to a certain amount, they lost the project manager, or the annual revenue, they lost the project manager, or they got a lower tiered service department, or they didn't get a dedicated service department, or they went implemented through a third party. So just understand, going back to your budget, right? If the proposal's over your budget and you're trying to get it in your budget, tell them that for sure, but also find out in writing what you're losing at that discount. So if your budget is $70,000 and the budget for a implementation fee is $5,000, and they come in at 80 and 10 and they drop that, don't just assume that they just did this discount to get you to that price. Understand if they're losing anything with that, right? And understand what's your team's responsible and what's their team. Are they converting the data? Who's validating it? How much historical data is coming with this, and what historical data? How many test payrolls? How long is the implementation? Is that flexible, or is that we start immediately? When does billing start? Who's building the integrations? Is it them directly, or are they using a third-party consultant, or do you have to go find someone? Who's training your staff and your administrators? Are there guides, or is it just, hey, this is up to you, and kind of what's optional and what's required? One of the biggest things is the billing start. Some vendors will not never bring it up unless you ask. Some vendors bill when you start payroll, right? They start running your monthly invoices as you're running payroll. Some start immediately when you sign that contract. So you might have a 6 to 8 week or 6 to 12 week area where you're paying two vendors. Is it also signature, or is it go live, right? When is the setup fee hit? How much is that? And then ask about buyouts, or ask about, the contract terms. If implementation's going awful, do you have a window to pull out at, really no penalty to you? Are you going to be stuck paying the rest of the contract? Is it a contract? Is it month to month? And really all of those different things. Because again, the demo doesn't necessarily mean everything that you get's going to come with what you saw, because there's also different levels of product at certain companies. They'll have a scheduling and then a scheduling plus, or you'll get 3 workflows that come through and then every other workflow costs extra. Another thing to make sure that's on your quotes are integrations. A new tactic that I've seen kind of a lot lately with certain vendors is that they tell you that they can integrate with all these products. So you just have to go to the marketplace, select it, start the process, and they don't put any of the integrations on the quote. What you find out is when you go to the marketplace and you hit initiate, that there's another $2,000 setup fee and another $2 per employee per month. So just make sure you have every single thing that you need listed on those agreements. Know all the ancillary, what's W-2 is going to cost, off-cycle payrolls, shipping, previous year history, etc. This is kind of, I just spent a lot of time talking about this, just the understand the other side of the discount. If someone gives you 40% off or 30% off, what did you agree to? Is this a 3-year or 5-year contract? What's the annual increase? Another thing is, do those discounts expire? Some vendors do the discount for the first quarter, some do it for the first year, some lock those discounts for life, and they just have a standard increase of 5% or 6% or 8%. So again, discounts aren't bad, but don't just take the number. If they match that discount to you, find out what happened. Did they take anything off? Are you going to lose anything on the implementation or service side? And just understand more. All right. So the buyer's checklist, just if you remember nothing else, remember this. I think this is the most important aspect. Build your business case before you shop. Build your buying group around the people doing the work. Create your needs before vendors start showing you features or changing your perspective. Put context around those needs internally and externally, so that the other people on this team know why you need this so bad and what you're struggling with, but also the vendor of how critical this is. Create the decision criteria before the demos, use your network, keep the vendor list manageable, evaluate the people just as much as the technology and the company, and require proof about limitations, require proof about that solution, score every single thing while it's fresh, and spend just as much time understanding the implementation as you do the negotiating price. If you do those things, you're going to be a much harder buyer to sell to. And I mean that as a compliment, because you're forcing the vendor to prove that they're the right fit, rather than by saying how good they are, talking through and telling you stories and not showing you the actual solution. So that's all we have today. We can open it up for any questions. There's no real perfect HR or payroll system. Every system has pros, every system has cons, and all of those are based on perspective and needs. So I've been in the industry long enough to confidently say that you really need to find out unbiasedly what's best for you. So it's not perfection. It's making an informed decision and trade-off, knowing where the limitations are before you sign, not 6 months in the implementation. And ultimately, I think that's where you're going to have your success. So, Scott, pass it back to you.
Of course. Thank you. Of course, you pass it back to me as soon as I get
Yeah. So I think that while you're trying to catch up, if you ever, we are Guardian HR. We also do Guardian Payroll. We have our own system. We run a really good process. I like to explain our process a little bit here is we don't bring in pre-sales solutions consultants. We bring in the implementation team to do our discovery. We're going to push you to get to a scope and a buyer's checklist that we want to use and see as well. And our from discovery, from demo to implementation to go live is the same team. And then we do a client review from there. So if you ever want to learn more and learn about our capabilities on the payroll side, feel free to scan this link and book a time with us directly. But yeah, if there's any questions, we'll answer them.
And I'm back, so you can go to the next slide for me, please.
Yeah, the next slide was just a thank you.
Oh, okay, good. I appreciate everybody for coming. PJ, thank you for being here today. And again, if you want to rewatch this, it'll be in your dashboard. If you want to learn more, you can scan that QR code and link up with PJ. Thanks again, everybody. We appreciate your time. Have a good day.
And yeah, we'll be in here for any other questions.
I think we're good. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.